Hi, Sam.
Hi, Jacob.
Go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone.
What's up, friends? I'm Sam, the founder of Oslo.
Tell us what Oslo is. Tell us about like creating this company, being young, and having this idea. Like, what did that process look like?
So when I came up with the idea, I was working for a software company and living in San Francisco. And I was very, like I said, unhappy, but one of those things where everything on the outside seemed really, really good. I had a great job. I was making good money. I was living in a beautiful city with a lot, great friends. But I just felt really just empty and like I was, depressed to the point where I was like, I don't know what the point of this is if I'm doing all of the things that are going really great, but I feel this sad and inside. And at that same time, I was able to join a new company and was exposed to an incredible person named Mahesh Ram, who was the CEO. And I saw him running the business and making decisions, and I realized in that moment that that's what I was supposed to be doing. Now, I'd already realized that I did not care at all about software, so I knew I wasn't supposed to be doing that for a software company. But that started my path of like exploring entrepreneurship and coming up with what would eventually be Oslo.
Why did you choose Oslo instead of something else?
Well, the biggest reason was because I saw that the most detrimental thing in my life to that point was my drinking habits, and just I knew kind of innately that alcohol wasn't good for me, that it wasn't adding anything to my life and actually was detracting a lot from my life. So I explored a lot of different business ideas that were, most of them terrible. But when I came to this idea of solving drinking for me, or making my drinking habits a little bit healthier, it was an idea that I just couldn't get rid of.
Okay, so you came up with this idea of creating a beverage that helps with your drinking. What do you do first? Like, most people would be like, hey, like, it's very common to have ideas, but now we have a can in front of you and people buy it. Like, what did that process look like?
Coming from the software space, I kind of assumed that you have an idea for a drink, you tell somebody about it, and it magically appears. And I knew nothing about what ended up being just an insanely large and complex industry of food science and formulation. That fun fact, there are a ton of companies where all they do is come up with ideas, or take your idea and create a beverage out of it. But even those people who are like really talented and experienced in that, it takes a ton of iterations and experimentation, and it also costs a ton of money. And at that point, I had a little bit of money from the job I was working, but I did not have enough to pay for what would be one of the bigger formulation companies. So my first job was just to like Google search and talk to a bunch of people, ask a lot of questions, and try to pretend like I wasn't a complete novice, so I didn't get taken advantage of. I ended up getting taken advantage of anyway, with the first person that I worked with, where I told him about the idea I had. We had this like great conversation and connection around what I wanted to bring into the world. And as soon as we signed a contract and I paid him half the money, I just would hear from him maybe once a month. And
No.
yeah, so I spent about like 7 months and like $4,000 to get to the end of that feeling like the most discouraged I've ever felt. So yeah, very challenging process to go from idea to beverage in a can.
Okay, so give me a brief outline of like, found the person that you did want to work with.
Yeah.
Testing the flavors, the packaging, like, give me a 1 minute spiel of that process.
Yeah. Well, after I'd been taken advantage of, I basically gave up on the idea. I was going to move to Colorado and just ski bum it until I either went to business school or, found something else that I was going to do. And I was networking a lot. So I heard back from this woman who I'd had like a 10-minute call with, and she asked to get coffee on like a beverage entrepreneur to entrepreneur standpoint. And I almost bailed because I had given up on my dream of being an entrepreneur at that point. But I went anyway, and she asked me how things were going. I reflexively told her that it was awful and I was basically going to give up and move to Colorado, with nothing other than just like disappointment. And I talked for 20 minutes straight, and by the end of that stream of consciousness, I got super embarrassed because I realized that the entire meeting had gone by and I had not asked her any questions. But it got really quiet. She looked at me and she was like, first of all, Sam, you're, as an entrepreneur, like I've never heard of anyone trying to build something that has not been exactly where you are right now. It's a super challenging process. You're very alone. Number two, I have a consulting company where I formulate beverages for a living. I love your idea. Can I make it for you? And that was the
wow.
the
Look at that
where,
little universe, huh? Yeah. The universe end right there.
Yeah. And that was, leaving that meeting and like looking at the trees and everything. That was like the first time in my life where I think I felt like truly present and like everything was just locked in.
Like life was magic.
Exactly. So that was, that happens. She makes a couple different flavors. We go and test and iterate. Like, I like this, I don't like this. And at that point we were making it to be like paired with alcohol, because alcohol was such a focal point of my life, like a central piece of my life, that like eliminating alcohol or not drinking was not something that even came to mind as like an option. So we were coming up with different flavors, testing them with like tequila mostly. And then that's where she was like, lime and mint, this is the best thing we can get. So that's how we ended up with our first formula. But from there, all I had was a PDF of a formula for like a tea that she wrote out in her own handwriting and then scanned onto a computer. And so I just started making batches in my kitchen and just was like trying to figure out how to make it in a way that looked normal and tasted good.
Wow. Okay. So we're in Colorado right now. You ended up moving here.
I did.
What was that like?
So I got the formula. The formula was done.
Where were you when this was going down?
This was in Chicago.
Okay.
So I was living in Chicago at that point. I basically decided I was moving like a month later, before this meeting. And when that happened, and I was like, I think I need it. I can't leave yet. I got to stick around to see what happens here. So January 2020 is when I get the formula from her. I pick April 22nd, 2020, which April 22nd is my birthday, but like that's when I'm going to launch this thing, whatever I had. And I still knew nothing. Like I had not designed a label, had not built a website. There were no actual components of the business, but I just picked a date. And as we all know, March 2020 rolls around, pandemic hits, world shuts down, and like foils all those plans. I basically give up on that. Again, I go get my real estate license. I do pretty much everything, gave up on the dream yet again. And I read David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me, and realize basically it came to me at a point in my life where I was like, okay, I could either do this drink company, I could stay and sell software, or I could go explore real estate. And like was sitting there with way too much time on my hands, thinking and overthinking this decision on which path was the right one. And what that book did for me is like, okay, if that person can endure all of that and do all of that, like I can try to do these three things at the same time. And I just basically committed myself to giving my full effort in all three areas and letting the universe basically decide which one stays, which one pulls me. So I did that for like 3 months. I lasted like 3 days at the software company caring fully. But stayed there for a little bit longer. And then I found out that with a real estate license, it's good for a year after you pass the exam. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go all in on this drink and I have a year lease where I can spend a year focusing on it. And if nothing good happens, I'll come back and I'll do the real estate thing. But after I made the decision to go all in on the drink, I was basically trying to decide where to go. And Colorado has been a place that is, I've almost moved here so many different times. But as I thought about it more from a business standpoint, it was like, this is not only where I want to be personally, but seemed to be perfectly aligned with what I was trying to create.
Okay, so tell us a little bit, we'll talk about what you want the future of Oslo to be. But what has the success or the exposure of Oslo been like the last year, right? So I think we've known each other maybe something close to that, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of understand the last year. Let's go the last 2 years all together. What has it been like?
Yeah, so the last 2 years have been incredible. In that 2 years ago, I was selling something I called an elixir, which was a concentrated version of this in a glass bottle, and was still in the test and iterate and honestly just failing in different ways process. And it was September of last year when a friend of mine approached me saying he had just bought a canning line and asked me if I'd ever thought about canning my product. And I was like, somewhat, but I would love to try it. And we came out with the first version of the spritz, and it was pretty instantaneously a hit, which was pretty incredible. But going from that point to realizing that the cans I had were not at all what people were looking for, needing to redesign the packaging and then ultimately come out with new flavors. It's been kind of a whirlwind to realize that where we were at this point last year to where we are now has been pretty incredible.
We've talked a little bit about you going door to door to businesses. Tell us a little bit about the grind of the last year or so, or last 2 years.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's not talked about often with beverage companies in particular is how challenging it is to break in when you don't have substantial financial backing or just insane connections to different places. And so what I do every day is I have a rule where I have to drop off samples at one new place every single day. And that involves me driving somewhere, meeting the manager, telling them a little bit about myself and the product, and leaving them samples and, hoping that they like it and call me back. And
what's the success rate on that?
Less than 1%, I would say. Yeah. Right now. Okay. Yeah. We have, I think 50 accounts today, and I've dropped samples. Beyond this year, we're talking probably close to 1,000 places.
Okay. So we've talked about, a little bit of the process of getting to where we are now. Where is Oslo now, and what, 2025 is around the corner, and years in the founder stage are a lot can change.
Yeah.
What are you looking for out of 2025? And where is Oslo currently?
Right now, we're at a pretty big inflection point. I think this 2024 was our foundation was built from a production standpoint, product standpoint, things like that. So 2025 is going to be our first year to really be able to share that in a broad way. So I'm really excited about a couple of the key partnerships that we're going to be launching with actual kind of national grocery store type places, which is going to make my life a lot easier because I cannot hand deliver to those places. So we'll be working with distributors and getting a lot more mass distribution in different places. But also it'll mark a very significant moment of legitimacy for the brand, which, as I mentioned earlier, started with me mixing batches in my kitchen to now being, distributed across the country. So, yeah, Can
you say any of the stores that you'll be in or that you're talking to, or, and it falls through, whatever.
Yeah.
Who are you talking to right now?
So, the Sprouts and It's Sprouts and Natural Grocers are the two that we're like actively talking to right now, which I'm very excited about.
How cool is that? It's amazing.
Pretty cool. And then today I got a commitment from a more regional one, but it's a company called Foxtrot, which started in my hometown of Chicago. But my early days of like coming up with what the brand was going to be happened in the Foxtrot coffee shops. And the whole time I was like, I need to make something that's going to be on these shelves. And on January 1st, we're going to be a part of the Dry January set. So I'm very excited about that.
Okay, so we've talked about what Oslo is, kind of the ingredients a little bit. What you've done, where you want to go. Are there any, I guess, like closing remarks that you would like to say about, your story, or maybe gratitude, or the product, or just something overall as like your final goodbye?
What I kind of see as the future of this brand, but also just like the non-alcoholic beverage space in general, is ultimately getting to a point where there are non-alcoholic seltzers and there are seltzers. There's non-alcoholic beers and there's beers. The two worlds coexist, and the stigma around choosing the non-alcoholic option will go away. And I think that what's been really incredible about the years leading up to this, and what I think 2025 can bring, is that we can help merge those worlds together and kind of provide something for people who don't want to drink in that moment or at all, something that helps them feel like they belong and can make the two worlds coexist together in a really powerful way. I'm Sam, the founder of Oslo, and I just want to say thank you for watching and for all the support. I appreciate you all so much. So, cheers.